Welcome, fans, to a special edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And tonight we're pleased to have the one and only Michael Modest on the show, who most fans will remember from the movie Beyond the Mat. Michael, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm fantastic, Jack. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for appearing. To begin, I wanted to ask you, being a native of California and growing up in California, what promotion or promotions did you follow that sort of made you a fan of the business?
Well, I really didn't follow anything locally. My parents weren't wrestling fans, and I watched Roy Shire's Channel 2 wrestling. That's my earliest memories. Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson, and Pepper Gomez. And the only reason I watched that was because of my uncle. When I would stay the night at my cousin's house, we would always watch wrestling, and also when my uncle would come over, he would frequently say, "Hey, come on, let's go into a different room and turn on my parents' black and white and watch wrestling in there." And it wasn't until I was 8 that I started seeing WWF, wrestling, and man, it got me hooked. And then I looked for everything. I used to watch a lot of World Class on ESPN. They had World Class, and it was just like repeats of like a couple of years, but I didn't care. It was still awesome to see. I would also catch AWA sometimes on ESPN or other channels. It was difficult to see much that wasn't in, it wasn't as easy as it is now to view wrestling all over the place. So yeah, so I guess Roy Shires would be the answer to that question. That was my first wrestling viewing was Roy Shire's company. Big Time Wrestling.
Yes, the classic promotion. Did you have any particular wrestlers, or either tag team or singles, that inspired you to look at pro wrestling as a career growing up?
I don't think there was anybody in particular. I think it was just the spectacle in itself. Wrestling in itself is what I was a big fan of. I had favorites growing up. I liked Lonnie Main, Moondog Main, Ray Stevens. I even patterned myself a little bit after Ray Stevens. Roddy Piper was one of my favorites. I was really bummed when he passed away, and I never got a chance to meet him, and would have really loved to have met Roddy Piper. So those were my earliest real, that's who I was a fan of, I guess. To answer your question, I guess I answered it.
Yes, sir. So what, looking back, made you, was there a moment when you decided, I want to make this a career for myself? Was there like a, I don't know, a moment of truth, or was it just something that you kind of, fell into after a while?
Well, when I was, I think around 16, some friends and we had a backyard wrestling company called the Vacaville Wrestling Federation, and we got money from the Vacaville Team Committee to rent a ring and do these like wrestling shows, and none of us were trained, and everybody could have got hurt at any time, and but things were like, people, I don't know, things were a lot looser back then. I don't think it'd be a harder sale to a team committee now. But yeah, they gave us money to rent a ring, and we just kind of practiced on amateur wrestling mats and tried not to hurt each other, and then I was renting the ring from Jerry Monty, who was a WWE enhancement talent is what they call him now, but I always preferred the term jobber. So he was a WWE jobber, and I started renting the ring from him, and then that's how I kind of got into the business. Was he recognized that with no training, I knew a few things, just from watching on television, and so he gave me a really good, price to come and train down there in Hayward. It was a couple hours from where I lived, and so that was what kind of got me into it.
What and I know you have worked as a trainer in the past, and we'll get into that in terms of your experience on that side of the ledger. But how was your training experience back then? Was it old school, as they say, or were they trying to break you? We hear the power plant stories, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you characterize your personal experience training?
Well, so yeah, I guess I kind of got jumped into the business. I had started training with Jerry Monty, and the training was not real sport oriented. He would just kind of show you, like maybe an arm bar and maybe this or that. I don't know. It wasn't regimented, like later training experiences with Rick Thompson and APW. Rick taught wrestling like a sport, drills and lots of amateur wrestling before we ever got to do any of the body slams and stuff. But my first trainer, Jerry, we were doing body slams and all kinds of different things. And so my first match, I was really excited. The night before, I couldn't even hardly sleep because I was thinking about all these ideas that I had for the match, And so I went to the fairgrounds. That's where the match was. And I was wrestling a guy named the Samoan Bulldog. And, there was no way to go online and go look at him or anything like that. But I did have a picture of him that Jerry got. And I was really excited because he was like 280 pounds, 300 pounds, real big Samoan guy with two mohawks, running both sides of his head, kind of like Hawk. And I was only 180 pounds or so. But to me, he was like a real pro wrestler. So I was really excited to wrestle him. And when he got to the fairgrounds, he flew in from Hawaii. And when he got to the fairgrounds, I was real eager to talk to him. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, you want to talk over the match?" And kind of looked at me and he said, "No, not right now." He said, "I just got here." And he said, "I got to put some tape on and, I'll call you over in a little bit." So I said, "Okay." And I waited and he calls me over and he says, "So you got some ideas?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a lot of ideas." And he goes, "Okay, well, let me hear 'em." So I told him all my ideas, and there was lots of them. And then when I was done talking, he goes, "Okay." And I said, "Okay to what?" He goes, "Okay to all of it, boss." I should have known when he said boss. I should have known that there was that things were going to go badly for me. He said, but he goes, "Yeah, we're going to do everything you say, boss." He goes, "I like all your ideas." So I walked away and I was trying to remember what the fuck I'd even said because I was only pitching ideas. This wasn't like I wasn't saying let's do it all. I was saying we could do this, we could do that, and so I walk away feeling pretty good. I'm patting myself on the back, doing the old Barry Horowitz, and then we get in the ring and we go to lock up, and on the lockup he just punches me straight in the face, right in the nose. And my nose just busted open like a tomato. And I hit the ground and I rolled out of the ring and I looked up at him and I could taste the blood. It was already pouring down the back of my throat and it was all over the front of my face. And I looked up at him and he said, "I'm going to fucking kill you, brother." And he started coming at me and I ran. And he was the baby face and I was the heel. So I insulted people on the way out, obviously, because I was the heel, And so I'm running around the ring and people are like cheering him on to come butcher me, basically, and I slide in, and as he's sliding into the ring, I think to myself, I'm going to hit him. I'm going to kick him really nice and easy. So he knows that I get it, man. I know what we're doing here. This is a work, so I gave him a nice, easy kick, and he no-sold it and got up and punched me in the face again. He picked me up and clotheslined me in my face. And then he picked me up and dropped me on my shoulder. Like, I don't know exactly what he did, if it was a body slam or what, but he picked me up in the air. I was pretty much out of it. And I got taken to the locker room by, ring crew and stuff, because I was fucked. And when I was laying on the floor, and when I kind of got my senses about me, I right away, I was like, holy shit, I got to get out of here. Whatever I did to piss this guy off, he's probably going to come and beat my ass some more. Like, he's probably not done. He's probably still angry, So I gathered my shit and got out of there real fast. And I skipped wrestling practice the next week. And then it took me a couple weeks to go back. And when I showed back up, Jerry Monty said, "Oh, hey, all right, you came back." And I was like, "Yeah. What was that all about, Jerry? Like, why did he beat me up like that, And Jerry Monty said, "Well, the next time a 20-year veteran in the business asks you, and it's your first match, asks you if you have any ideas, the answer is no. You have no ideas, and you defer everything to the veteran." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, hey, you could have just told me that. I didn't need the whole gangland beat down to join the industry." But that's kind of what that's how I got into the business, basically. Started, I was doing my own little backyard thing, and then I got in there with the big boys, and got my ass handed to me the first time, and then each additional time after that, like, because the other thing, when I got into the business, there weren't a whole lot of small guys. When I first got into it, mostly everybody was big, and most of the guys I wrestled with were, had me by 50 pounds or more, and a lot of them tried to take liberties with me. And I just eventually learned how to protect myself, and my wrestling got better. And I also developed this kind of thing where I just didn't give a shit about getting beat up anymore. I was going to give them some licks too. It was more along those lines, like, okay, well, we can work tonight, or you can beat my ass and you'll go home with a broken nose and a black eye too. Yeah, you'll win the fight, but like, we can do it however you want. And yeah, eventually I ended up being like more of the stiff wrestler. Like, people would actually ask me to calm down, and, hey man, can you take it a little easier, on me in there. These twin brothers, the Ballard brothers, they always joke around about my clothesline, because if you don't bump good for my clothesline, you're gonna bump one way or the other, because I'm gonna take your head off. My clotheslines, I throw them like it's a shoot, and you have to bump properly. You bump properly, it won't be a problem, But if you don't, then you're gonna feel it. And so yeah, I became kind of like a stiffer wrestler, because I wrestled so many guys that were that way to me.
Do you think that that aspect of the business, and not speaking uniformly, but for a lot of the major promotions, that realism, the fact that it looks like, or should look like, an actual combat situation is missing, and that's detracted from the sport, as opposed to we see a lot of high spots and acrobatics, not to point names, but
well, I don't know if it just detracted from the sport, because the sport's more popular now than it's ever been. So maybe moving towards a lucha libre style product was just a part of the evolution of wrestling. But with All Pro Wrestling and also Future Stars of Wrestling, which I did work with them for a little while in Las Vegas. The idea wasn't, it was basically to give them a menu, to give people lots of options in their professional wrestling. Like maybe one match would be a little comedy. Maybe another one is high flying and more of a lucha style. Maybe you have more of a British style, with lots of fancy chain wrestling, and then you could throw in a shoot thing in a match, or some MMA type guys as well. Noah did that really well. I wrestled with them in Japan, and I think that was the whole kind of concept. Was Noah took took a little of everything to put in his boat, and so I think that was their concept as well, is like, hey, we can have cruiserweights that are flip flopping around, and then we can have a guy like Kobashi, who is super physical and can drop you on the head with the best of them. So yeah, I watched AEW last night, and I don't watch wrestling very often anymore. And one of the reasons I watched was because I knew they were going to do the tribute for right, and for Jamin, and so I wanted to see that, and that whole thing has just broken my heart. His daughters, I pray for them constantly. They're in constant prayers. But that was the main reason I watched, and I was impressed with the show. By and large, it's amazing to me the push that a guy like Darby Allin gets at 175 pounds. And also Jungle Boy, who I'm friends with. I know this guy, and Jack Perry's just a great human being, and I'm so happy the way they're using him, and his tag partner Hook, and then also I'm sorry, the Luchasaurus guy is awesome. A lot of it is spottier than I really like, and honestly, I wouldn't put Darby Allin over the dude that he beat last night. I don't even know what the guy's name was, but he really big, beefy dude, great look. He's got the witch evil lady that comes out with them and stuff. And if I was gonna put Darby over that guy, the match would have been done 100% differently. The match was pretty back and forth, and then Darby beat him flat out. I would have had the guy just whooping Darby's ass from pillar to post, and maybe he gets lucky at the end, when the guy goes for something. Yeah, and he moves and scoops him up or whatever. So I mean, but that's neither here nor there. I still, watched the show. I still enjoyed it, But mostly when I watch wrestling now, I go to YouTube and I look for older stuff. And the things that impress me are small things. It's not, any asshole can jump off of a balcony. All you got to do is have balls and a willingness to hurt yourself. I have always loved the art of professional wrestling. I have always loved making people think that I'm hurt and I'm not, rather than hurting myself and people think I'm hurt. So I kind of forgot my whole train of thought on that, but yeah, that's my whole thing is wrestling is an art, you know. And I remember something in particular that really impressed me early on in my career. I was at All Pro Wrestling and I was watching a VHS tape. We used to trade tapes online, and I had this tape of Dick Murdoch wrestling Bob Armstrong, and you know Dick was kind of uh, roughing Bob up early on in the match, just kind of like grabbing him by the hair, taking him into the corner, not breaking clean, but not really hitting him hard or anything either. Just kind of being a jerk. You know, Dick was being a dick about it, and it was pissing Bob off. And finally, after a little bit of angering, you know, Bob was too pissed off, and he punches Dick right in the face, right in front of the referee. The referee gets on Bob. The way Dick took the bump was the way a boxer would get knocked out. He even straightened his arms like he got knocked out by the shot. And when I saw it, I was like, whoa, did that really catch him? Because he didn't bump. You know, it wasn't a pro wrestling, whoa, you know, he didn't slip on a banana peel. His knees collapsed and then his arms went straight. And then Dick rolled out of the ring and his manager was helping him up and trying to, you know, get him to come to. And when Dick stood up, he reached into his mouth and he checked his tooth. And then he looked at his fingers to see if there was any blood. And you could see him tasting it. And then he spit. And I thought to myself, either he's the most amazing seller in the world, or Bob Armstrong just nailed him. Because I could almost see the blood. The sell was so good, you know. So it's little things like that that I really look for, and that when as a fan, when I'm watching professional wrestling, I'm looking for little things like that pop me and make me go, wow, you know, because it made me a believer. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what's cool is making people believe in the magic, you know, at least while they're there.
And that's what a lot of fans and commentators talk about is the absence of psychology in wrestling. And I've heard you mentioned Future Stars of Wrestling in Vegas, and I've heard the training there not only focuses on the moves and you know, how to put a match together, but the psychology behind it, which seems to be, you're absolutely right. That's what engages people and brings them in, but seems to be somewhat of a lost art in, you know, the Spot Fest promotion, so to speak.
Yeah, and the hurry up and get your shit in. You know, and TV's partly to blame for that, because producers and directors that are, you know, putting this stuff together and doing the edit and finishing the product and putting the product out there, they don't want to waste any time, because the average viewer just has a short attention span now, especially with things like TikTok and I mean, it's okay. So YouTube came out, right? And YouTube, you could watch short videos and this and that. And now TikTok's like what, 10, 15 seconds a pop. So it's like people's attention span is getting shorter. So I think the reason wrestling kind of gravitated towards this kind of spottier version of itself is to keep people's attention. You know, if people aren't flying around and chairs aren't hitting people in the head and tables aren't being broke, well, someone might turn the channel. You know, a lot of people don't have the patience to wait for a good story. One of the favorite things that I've ever done, like it's going to sound really goofy because I really loved that I did this, One of the things that I really loved that I did in Japan. Okay, so we've all seen the babyface grab Ric Flair in the headlock. They take him down, and then Rick grabs him by the tights and rolls him over. 1, 2, back to the headlock again, rolls him over again. 1, 2. Now maybe they get up and they do a spot, back to the headlock, boom. Rick rolls him back over. 1, 2. And yet no one's ever won a match that way. No one has ever won a match by being in the headlock on the mat and rolling the guy over, tights or not, and then going 1, 2, like it just never happens. And why a 2 count on that as well? It's almost always 1, 2, and then back to the headlock. So that move always bothered me. It's a time killer and it's a waste of time because every fan knows that the end of the match is not right now. Ric Flair is not beating anybody by rolling them over like that. And so when I was in Japan, I wrestled an older guy, Ricky Momota. And he did a belly to back suplex back in the day as a finisher. That was his finish. And so I came up with this idea and I pitched it to him. It was a smaller house. It wasn't for television. So Noah gave us a little more leeway on our finishes and stuff if it wasn't televised. So what we did was we worked the headlock, the whole match. He's putting me over in the headlock and I'm rolling him over. 1, 2, back to the headlock. 1, 2, and we get up and do a spot, back to the headlock. 1, 2. And at the end of the match, he's got me going. He's chopped me up and I'm rocking and reeling. He goes to hit me with his finisher. I break it. I kick my legs. I go back down. I switch. I go for the finisher on him. I go for his finisher on him, right? I go to take him up in the suplex. He kicks. He comes back down and he takes me over in an amateur head and arm takeover. And when he takes me over into the head and arm, I rolled him over into the stack, and this time I bridged. So he was stacked tight. I mean, he couldn't have kicked out if he wanted to because I bridged into it, and it was stacked like an amateur wrestling stack. And the fans went crazy for it because they understood the psychology. They understood that I kept trying to beat him with this move the entire match. And the only reason I was finally able to do that was because I bridged into it this time and he wasn't expecting that. And he was stacked too deep to kick out. He was moving his legs, but there was just no kicking out of it this time. And man, Mitsuhara Misawa came up to me and he said, "Oh, good finish." He really liked it because now the rest of the card, everybody that did that in a match, people actually believed, oh shit, this might be it. We just saw it on the first match. This was the finish. And I think that's one of the lost arts of promoting now is that FSW included, no one wants to finish a match with a small package or a sunset flip, or some cheesy little headlock rollover. But that's the whole point. If every once in a while someone beats somebody with a hip toss, or what's wrong with beating someone with a drop kick? You drop kick them right in the face and they start to get up, but they're too groggy and they kind of fall back down. You go for the quick cover, 1, 2, 3. No one finishes with the simple moves anymore. It's always got to be your cliche, the Dominator. Oh, I hit him with the Dominator, bro. I got to hit you with the Tilt-A-Whirl Twisted T, bro. It's always got to be some crazy ass name of some move for the finish. And it's like, hey, how about not? How about just pin him with something easy so that in the main event, people are actually buying into everything. by the time, if you did it that way, by the time the main event's rolling around, every sunset flip is going to get a pop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every smaller move is going to actually get people going because it could be the finish. You know, so I think that's one of the things that wrestling has really gotten away from, and it's one of the things that it makes it unwatchable for me, because to me that's all filler now. And I don't know how any other fan can look at it any other way. You know, until they start going into the false finishes, man, it ain't going to be a finish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would love to see finishes done in just the heat sometimes. Hey, what about if the baby faces don't get a comeback?
Mm-hmm.
What if they start making a comeback and then boom, they're cut down real fast and pinned? You know, like the finishes need to come more out of nowhere, and they don't anymore. It's always at the end. I call it the Japanese finish, because the Japanese wrestling back in like the early '90s was real big on that. You know, like you could hit a guy with your finisher. You know, if it's a main event, you hit the guy with your finisher, boom, he kicks out. Now he gets up, boom, he hits you with his finisher, you kick out. Now you hit him with the finisher off the top rope, boom, he kicks out. He hits you with the finisher off the top rope, boom, you kick out. You know, so yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I kind of just go off on tangents.
No. This is fascinating. I couldn't agree with you more. They're really devaluating moves that not much means anything anymore. It's ridiculous.
Right.
You were signed with WCW during an interesting period. Do you have any memories that stand out from that tenure? Any notable matches or opponents, or just the environment?
Well, I'll tell you, man. I loved. So I was contracted with them twice. And both times I was a victim of company politics. The first time I was brought in by Kevin Sullivan and Bob Mould and Ed Ferrara. And Bischoff and Russo came back and they fired me. Then Bischoff and Russo brought me back with Chris Daniels on a tryout that they also turned into an angle with Big Papa Pump. And we got signed there as well. And man, both Sullivan and Bischoff, both of them had really big plans for me. Sullivan was going to put the cruiserweight belt on me, which is why I beat Prince Iaukea in the non-title match. That was supposed to be a title match. I was going to be like this unknown guy that wins a belt out of nowhere, kind of like Rocky Balboa kind of thing. And that was Kevin's idea. And then when I got to South Padre Island that day, I found out that Kevin was fired and that Russo and Bischoff had come back and that the finish had been changed. It was no longer going to be a title match, and I was supposed to lose. And Terry Taylor and Mike Graham were high on me, and they loved that I wrestled, that I actually knew how to wrestle. And so they changed it back to me going over, but it being a non-title match. And I'll tell you that match in itself was just such a great experience. One, I got to travel with Chris Candido, who I really loved. Me and Chris got along really well. In fact, Bischoff's idea for me was going to be for me and Candido to be tag partners, and we were going to be Scott Steiner's minions, like his mini-me's. We both had the blonde hair, and we were both short, stocky, buffed guys, with Scott being the tall, big, buffed guy. And we were going to be like his mini-me's and run around and do bad things that he tells us to do. And I thought it would have been awesome. You know, what a great gimmick, and what a great time that would have been. But unfortunately, WWE bought the company, and then I was put on hold for almost a complete year, where I was allowed to still wrestle indies and stuff, and I was still being paid. And I was one of the last rounds of people cut when WWE was, controlling that company. And then eventually they ended up just closing it altogether. But my match against Prince Iaukea, it was really interesting because I was bummed when I got there and I found out what was going on. Obviously, I knew it was going to have a big impact on me. And then when I found out that I was still going over and that it was going to be non-title, I thought, well, they're not burying me, so maybe when Bischoff comes back, maybe I'll still have a job, And before that match, I had really been dieting, and I was in really good shape. And after the match, I went upstairs and sat on my balcony, and I ate a large pizza, pepperoni and olive, and I drank a bunch of beer, and I sat on the balcony of my hotel room and I watched Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair wrestle on the beach right below my balcony. And I thought to myself, this is one of the greatest nights of my life. I just felt like on top of the world, even though my career with that company I knew was shaky because of the management change. I didn't care. It was still just like a perfect night, even wrestling the artist, Mike, he and I stiffed each other in that match quite a few times. And it was mostly him, honestly. I'll be real. I was giving receipts. He was the crowbar. He was the one throwing potatoes. And it just seemed like everything he was doing to me, like if there was a way to throw a little cheap shot in there, he was. He went to cover me on one of the covers and he elbowed me in the face on the cover. He just went boom and got me right in the face. And there was a point where I'm punching him in the corner. I'm giving him the 9 count, and then I jump down. He stumbles forward, and 10 is a chop, right? And so I'm giving him the punches, and I connect on those. I always connect. It's punches to your forehead. Christ, come on, you can't take that. Like you're a pro wrestler, you can't take that. So I'm hitting him, and as I'm hitting him, every time I'm hitting him, he's saying something. He's going, "You stiff fucking prick, motherfucker." He's calling me out basically. And I hopped off him and I go, "Dude, stop bitching." And I gave him the chop for the 10. But I mean, that's how the match was. The whole match, like, was just I picked him up in my finisher and he tried to get out of it. He kicked his leg over to fuck it up for me, basically. And or maybe I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't know exactly what the move was, and so he thought he was supposed to kick his legs over. But I told him when he kicked his leg over and I was losing my grip, I told him, I said, "Bro, I'm going to drop you on your head." And then he brought his leg back for me. So I was able to, hit it the way I wanted to, because I didn't want to rush it. I wanted to run and hit him in the middle of the ring, run from the corner of it. So, yeah, but I would say every match that I had in WCW was a great memory because I was being used well. Both times I was there, they were putting me in a good spot. Just unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be, because both times the company switched on me. So that's life in the big city. And luckily there was Japan, after that.
We've got a fan question here. Tom wants to have me ask you how you liked Eddie Bear Ferrara as a writer.
Ferrara as a writer. So Ed Ed and Russo are more Hollywood, and their writing can be more liberal that way. But Ed is still a wrestler, and that's what a lot of people don't know, is that Ed Ferrara actually was a wrestler. He trained down with Vern Langdon down in Los Angeles, and that was the first time I ever met Ed. Was I had gone to the Cauliflower Alley down in Los Angeles, and I had stopped by Slammers to to meet everybody. And little did I know that years later he would be a writer for WWF or WWE and then WCW. And I have a lot to be thankful. He's the one that gave me that shot. He's the one that brought my name up to Bob Mould and Kevin Sullivan. And a lot of the writing that he did that was a little wilder, you got to remember it's guided by Russo, so Russo was still like the head writer, and so when the head writer doesn't value professional wrestling and doesn't think it's a sport and stuff, then you kind of have to, if you like your job, you have to present things that he's going to like. He didn't even think the belt was important. That's why he threw it on David. I'm sorry. From the Scream movies, David Arquette.
Arquette.
Yeah. I couldn't believe when he said that. When he said that the belt wasn't important, I said, for him to say that just shows you what a small mind he has, because the champion of your company represents your company. So your champion should be selling more merchandise than pretty much anybody. He should be selling more dolls, more whatever it is he's got, lunch boxes. They should be selling heavily, and your company should be doing better because of your champion as well. For example, I think WWE was doing pretty good when they had The Rock as champion. WWE was doing really well when they had Stone Cold Steve Austin as champion. They did great when they had Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior as their champions. The company was doing better. Houses were sold out. Merchandise was selling out. So how can you say that your champion is not important? Now, the belt may not be earned in the classic sense. The belt is given, but it's given for certain reasons usually, and one of those reasons is because you've got a look that the company thinks will sell tickets and draw interest, yeah, so I'm not going to go on too long about that, but I mean, yeah, for him to say that, it blew my mind. And but Ed Ferrara as a writer, I think Ed was a strong writer.
Sorry, we had a little StreamYard issue there. Another fan wants to ask if you had heat with Das Wunderkind Alex Wright.
Das Wunderkid? Das Wunderkind?
Das Wunderkid.
Yeah. I don't think I had any heat with him that I know of. There was a guy, and I just saw him actually on AEW not too long ago. Gosh, what was his name? It's almost like Kid Rock. Gosh. Yeah, no, no, Das Wunderkid, no, I don't have any heat with him. But there was another guy I was supposed to go somewhere. Jimmy Hart was trying to get this guy over, and his name was something Kid. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy because it'll come to my mind after we're done with this interview. And he was kind of like a kid rock gimmick kind of thing. And they wanted me to do a job for him. And this was, like early on. This was when Kevin Sullivan was bringing me in, and I refused. I was like, no, I'm not going to come in for a tryout and do the job. No, if I'm getting a tryout, I'm going over. So that was the only thing I could think of. It's driving me crazy. I can't remember that guy's name.
Kid Cash?
Yeah, Kid Cash. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was his name, Kid Cash. Yeah, and so I just saw him on AEW, and he's still wrestling as Kid Cash. And I thought, man, when you're 40 something years old or whatever it is, you got to get rid of the kid part, dude. Like, just be Cash, bro. Like
Maybe
Cash.
fully grown adult Cash or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. To circle back to your time just briefly, the Great North Wrestling Podcast is a Canadian centric podcast, and we know you had a run in Stampede where you were the international heavyweight champion. Do you have any quick memories of your time in that territory for our Canadian fans?
Oh man, it was so wonderful. I got to stay at the famous Hart Mansion. I met Stu Hart the first day I got there. I got to see the dungeon, the famous dungeon. Walking into the great room, it's like a living room, but it's a great room because it's so big. There were pictures of all the kids, and they were like really nicely done portraits of all the kids. And so it was really cool to walk in there and see Brett and Owen and everybody up on the wall like that. It was really, gosh, I don't know, a milestone in my career to go there. I got to wrestle Bruce Hart 5 nights in a row, and I'll tell you a funny story. The first night I wrestled Bruce, I was taking it real easy on him, because he's an older guy, and I was trying to show him some respect. So I was being nice and light. And at a point, we were in the corner, and I was, just kind of giving him a little bit of heat, and he flipped it around on me, and he kicked me in the balls like as hard as he could. And I gave him this look. I know it must have just been shock because I couldn't understand why he just kicked me in the balls so hard. And it was the toe of the boot as well, so it hit me like right in my taint, like it hurt bad. And I went down, I grabbed my crotch and I went down, and he went to grab my feet and spread my legs to give me another stomp to the groin. And I was like, fuck that. Now I'm not trusting you anymore. So I rolled out of the ring. I kept my legs together and I rolled out of the ring. And I was like, dude, all I could think was, I'm going to fucking give you a receipt now, old fella. Like, I don't care. You might be the Hearts, you might be one of the Hearts, but you just kicked me in the balls. And I'm going to show you right now that I'm a fucking professional. Watch this. So he comes over and I fucking boom, I punched him in the face. I didn't hit him in the nose because I didn't want to fuck shit up, but I gave him a good one in the side of the face. And when I hit him, he went, oh, and he went, yeah, okay, all right. And then I threw him in the ring and I started fucking nailing him, and everything I did was solid after that, real solid. And in the locker room, I asked him, I said, dude, what did I do? Why did you kick me in the balls? And he said, well, you were disrespecting me. And I said, disrespecting you? I said, well, how was I disrespecting you? And he goes, you were treating me like an old man. He goes, you weren't fucking hitting me. He goes, you were touching me real light. You were being really easy with me. He goes, that's disrespectful. And he goes, then did you notice once you started fucking nailing me because you were pissed? He goes, did you notice that's when the people started throwing cups and paper and shit? And I was like, yeah, I did notice that, because there was a definite change in the crowd. What happened was, before I started really beating the shit out of him, people were booing me. After I was beating the shit out of him and they saw when I would hit him, they saw the sweat flying and they saw the welts and they could see the impact. Once that started happening, they were no longer booing me. They were saying, I'm going to fucking kill you, you piece of shit, you fucking piece of shit, California. Like, all these really nice Canadians were really getting very angry with me. And it was because they saw that whether wrestling's real or fake, what they were seeing right now was real. What I was giving to them, especially on the floor, was legitimate. And Bruce Bruce at a point, Bruce says, throw my head into the post. So I threw his head into the post and he fucking hit his head on the post, man. And he had a cut when he hit his head on the post. And either he used a blade really quickly or he got it the hard way. I'm pretty sure it was the hard way, because it had a knot, where he hit it, and it was cut and he was bleeding good. And then for the rest of the nights, every night, all I had to do, because he would super glue it, and then I would just punch him really hard in the head and knock that super glue loose, and his cut would open back up. So it was really very believable fights. When I'd start pounding on his head and the people didn't see no blood, and then all of a sudden I keep hitting him, and then after like the fourth or fifth time, now blood's starting to come down. uh, People were very pissed. They didn't like that, and I had a great time. Interesting. People always talk about socialized medicine and how you have to wait in Canada and all this bullshit. So the next morning, I was peeing blood, and from being kicked in the balls, and so I called one of the guys that was kind of helping me out, and I asked him if he'd take me to the hospital, and he did. They took me to the hospital, and they checked me out and said that it should stop within a couple of days, and they didn't see any ruptures or anything, and so I was seen immediately that day. There was no waiting.
It's a triage here in Canada when you got a serious injury like that. You usually, hopefully, don't wait too long.
Yeah.
A lot of the fans have we'll get to Beyond the Mat in a minute, but a lot of the fans are interested in your time with APW when you were a trainer, and the gym wars concept, and your relationship with the late Roland Alexander. Do you have any memories of those issues?
Oh, lots of memories of APW. I loved APW, and I was diehard. It was my life at a point, and it was supposed to be partly my company. Um, when I went there, it was me, Rick Thompson, Roland Alexander, and a guy named George Myers, which most people don't know. George was all the money behind APW, and George had a used car lot, and so I, you know, I I did everything for that company. I trained. I tried to book shows. I did all kinds of things for that company with no money or very little money. And eventually, Roland started paying me. And when the company started bringing in more money, I started getting a little paycheck and stuff. But what happened was towards the end, when I finally got booked with Japan with Noah. I had come back from a tour, and this was how the falling out happened between Roland and I. I had come back from a tour of Japan, and I had a match that night in Vallejo. So I got off the plane and went to the show, and I was sick. I had caught some bug over in Japan, so I was already sick, and I was supposed to wrestle Bison Smith, and Roland had told Bison, "Oh, you need to hit Mike hard because Japan, that's how they do it, blah, blah, blah." And so I get in the ring, and Bison hits me with this forearm, and it was so hard, it almost knocked me out. The first forearm of the match almost knocked me out. And he was brutalizing me. And at a point, I started stiffening back, and I was like, I took him down and put him in a submission move. And I was like, ease the fuck up, man. I was like, why are you fucking doing this? And he was like, I'm sorry. And Roland told me that, that's how to hit you, and we finished the match, and he had also hit me with a German suplex early in the match, and I landed really badly on that. So the combination of him hitting me with brutal, hard forearms right in the jaw, most people, like, in case they don't know, this is where you're hitting. Right here is where you want to hit, not in the jaw. The jaw will fuck you up. So Roland had a schedule to go 25 minutes, and we did like 13. And after the match, Roland came in, and he was like, I thought you were supposed to go 25, but I guess you only went 13, huh? And he went storming off of and it pissed me off so bad because I had been his like right-hand man for so long, and he had already started pushing me out because I was wrestling in Japan now, and I had a legit job, and I wanted to be paid to wrestle. And so he was already kind of pushing me out. And after that comment, I was so pissed. I went out and I started talking to him. We exchanged a few words, and then I spit in his face and walked out. And that was pretty much the last time I worked for the company. And then Donovan took over, and Donovan still worked for the company for a while, but Roland felt like Donovan was still loyal to me. So Roland approached Spanky and American Dragon, Brian Danielson, to be his new instructor. He wanted them to be his new instructors. And so they told Donovan, they went, "Hey, man, by the way, Roland just offered us your job." So Donovan quit. And then that's when we started Pro Wrestling Iron. Donovan and I still needed a place to train. We were both working in Japan now, so we still needed a place to train, and it was a really strong company. I wish we would have held out for a little longer, because regional promotions came back. A lot of the independent wrestling shows, they're drawing just as well as a lot of the mainstream stuff, APW now, it's run by, it's funny, it's run actually by a fan that when he was, I think, like 13 years old, he started catching a bus to come to Gym Wars and shows and watch Gym Wars shows. And he was a fan of mine and all the first gym, APW guys. His name's Marcus Mack. And well, I don't know if that's his whole name, but if it's his real name, but that's what he goes by, Marcus Mack. But on Facebook. But Marcus runs the company now, and they draw better now than we ever did back in the day. Of course, he brings in, headliners, like he brought in Cody Rhodes and Joey Ryan for the Cow Palace. They ran the Cow Palace. So it's pretty cool. I know Roland would love to know that his company is in the Cow Palace, and that it draws well and that it's still running. Before Roland died, thankfully, he and I were on talking terms again, and I had spent time with them, and we were friends again. So that was nice, because I sure would have felt horrible if if he'd have passed and we'd have never fixed that.
Yeah, definitely. Life short. Now, a lot of the fans of the Hannibal TV are interested still in Beyond the Mat, and Hannibal did a review, I believe it was about a year ago, of the film, and it's really taken on an iconic sort of status in the internet wrestling community. What I'd like to ask you about your involvement in that, aside from your match with Tony Jones, who we had scheduled to come on the podcast. We hope to get him back again. But what was that backstage environment like in the height of the Attitude Era? And it seemed like you really got over with the execs, especially your finisher. And were you surprised that there appeared to be some momentum for both you and Tony after that, and then it didn't exactly turn out the way that you thought it would?
No. So interestingly, I was very skeptical of my tryout. I had so many tryouts with WWE, and I know the way the tryouts go. Here's how they go. Or how they used to go. I haven't had one in a long time, so I shouldn't say this. But here's how they used to go. If you have a tryout, they'll tell you you have 10 to 12 minutes, okay? And then about an hour before you go out, they'll tell you, hey, you only have about 5 minutes. And then up in the gorilla booth, they'll tell you, hey, you know what? We're going to cut that to about 3 minutes. And then when you get out there, they cut it right back to about 2 or 1.5, okay? So that's the way tryouts work with that company. And when Beyond the Mat came along and Barry Blaustein said, hey, we want to, we're going to get you this tryout, yada, yada. I said, well, I'm not interested in doing it. Cause I'd already reached a point where I was just tired of like bullshit. And I just started asking for what I really wanted, or I just wasn't interested in doing it. And so I told Barry, I said, I'm not really interested. I've had a lot of tryouts with WWE and I know the way it works. So I'm not interested in doing a tryout with them unless I get 10 minutes guaranteed. If I can get 10 minutes guaranteed, then I'll do the tryout. But other than that, no, I won't do it. So he went to them and they said, yeah, you can have the 10 minutes for the film, blah, blah, blah. So even Jim Cornette assured me that I had 10 minutes. And then Tony and I, we go out there and they did the same thing. Gorilla room. They start telling us, oh yeah, you guys, we're going to have to cut it short. Probably going to be about 5 minutes, And in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? Fuck you. I was told 10 and I'm taking my 10 because I don't give a fuck. I'm not even trying to get a job anymore. This is for a movie. And I already knew that WWE was never going to hire me. Vince didn't like me. I wasn't big. I wasn't tall. I was shorter than Coco Beware. I remember thinking, so when I was a kid looking at the wrestling magazines, I would look and I would see, oh, Coco Beware's only 5'10". Well, shit, I could be 5'10", Yeah, no, I wasn't even as tall as Coco. And so when Tony and I went out there, the referee, after about 2 minutes into the match, the referee starts telling us go home. And I had Tony in a headlock and I looked up at the ref and I just said, nope. And he was like, huh? He was like, that doesn't happen. He was like, didn't you hear me? Go home. And I said, oh, I heard you. No, we're not going home. I said, I was told 10 minutes and I'm taking it. And I said, that was the agreement. And so Tony and I wrestled the rest of the match. And I could hear at a point, I could hear Bruce Pritchard. He was yelling so loud into the referee's earpiece that I could hear him. And he was saying, tell him to go the fuck home. Does Modest know what the fuck go home means? Tell him to fucking go home. And cool as a cucumber, man. We finished the match and we did the finish, and the crowd fucking went crazy for it. So here's why I wanted the 10 minutes. I had a sneaky suspicion that I was going to be painted a certain way in the documentary, just as I had a sneaky suspicion they were going to paint Roland a certain way in the documentary. Now, the way they painted Roland, that's 100% true. They didn't paint him in a way that isn't true. But what they didn't show you is the full picture. They didn't show you what a kind person he could be. They didn't show you him taking me out to dinner because I didn't have money that week. You know, they didn't show you all the good things about Roland. They only highlighted the shitty promoter, kind of cheesy, independent promoter thing. And that was an entertaining character and an entertaining story to tell. Just as when I was pulling the body thing out of the van, I was no longer working at the mortuary during the filming of that film.
No way.
I was working at the mortuary when they first interviewed me for the film. By the time they had started the filming, I was working at a place called Court Furniture. But that's not very interesting. Like, that's not a good story to tell. So they asked me, they said, well, hey, can we maybe talk to your old boss and just get us over there for a few little things of you moving a body bag around so that we can say that you're still working there? I was like, sure, that's no problem. So I already knew that this wasn't going to be like, it was going to be like all reality TV, not real. It was going to be massaged, and it was going to tell a story they wanted to tell. And then when I heard that Draws was going to get a tryout and that he was also going to be a part of this movie, I realized quickly that I was going to be the sad sack. I was going to be painted as the poor guy. He wasn't good enough. Him and Tony just couldn't pull it off, but Draws did, blah, 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 you know. And so I saw this story that they were writing, and I was like, you know what? I'm getting my 10 minutes, because if I have 10 minutes, no one can deny that I'm a star. If I have 10 minutes to show my craft, I'll win the crowd over, even though I'm nobody. Because at first, when we walked out, the crowd could give a shit. You know, like, you're nobody. But me and Tony, you know, started moving around, started doing our thing. And again, they really didn't care. But once we caught them, they were hooked into the story that we were telling. And they loved our match, and the fans popped to the finish as if I was somebody, like I was a guy, you know. And so it changed the narrative of the documentary to where it looked like me and Tony had a shot, even though we never did get signed. That was the only reasonable thing to do. You couldn't have that reaction and then go, Mike and Tony just weren't good enough. You know, like, you know, you got D'Lo Brown in the back saying, I'm stealing it, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I loved being a part of the movie as well, because everyone in the industry now knew who I was. So, for example, one of the big guys that I really always admired and loved to watch wrestle was King Kong Bundy. He was one of my favorite big men. One was his name, King Kong Bundy. It just sounds like a bad dude, man. And his look, he had that stereotypical bully kind of look, you know.
A walking
And
condominium.
what's that?
A walking
Yeah,
condominium, as Gorilla used to say.
100%. And so I went and I wrestled a show back east somewhere, and King Kong Bundy was on the show. And when I was walking in the locker room, I was thinking to myself, man, I want to go up and shake his hand. I can't wait to shake his hand. I hope he doesn't think I'm a fucking mark, you know, because like I am. I'm a mark for this guy, you know. Like I've really liked him my whole life, and so I'm thinking about all this, and as soon as he sees me, he goes, Mike Modest. He goes, holy shit. So like he already knew, he had already seen the movie. And so he came up and he was laughing. He shook my hand, and I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool that this guy that I've put up on this pedestal already knows who I am. And he's funny as hell. Like people that don't know him, Bundy's a really funny guy. He's got a great sense of humor. And he told me real serious, he gets a real serious look and he goes, Mike, can you do something very serious for me? And I was like, of course, man. What do you need? And he goes, when you see Roland, would you tell him that he really inspired me? And I was like, yeah. How did he inspire you? And he goes, oh, his diet advice. He goes, the no eating of French fries. He goes, yeah, that's valuable stuff. And he starts laughing his ass off. He's like, I'm gonna start giving people diet advice. He goes, it's my new thing. He goes, I'm gonna be King Kong Bundy, the dietitian. He goes, you know, like
Awesome.
so. Also, Terry Funk from that movie. Terry Funk knew me, and I'm a huge fan of Terry's, you know, and I got to ride with Terry Funk because he found out that Chris Candido and I were driving together, and Chris had some kind of issue where a rent-a-car, something bad happened to a rent-a-car, so he couldn't rent cars. So I would rent the car, and then Chris would, you know, kick in some money or whatever if the company wasn't paying for it. Um, and so Terry Funk found out that we were riding together, and he was like, "Oh man, I like those guys." And so he came up and he was like, "Hey boys, can I you know ride along with you guys?" You know, and to me that was just awesome. You know, um, we got to the hotel, and Terry Funk kind of got lost on the on the elevator. Just a great guy, you know, and so yeah, the movie did amazing things for me in a lot of ways. You know, it definitely made at least people in the industry all know who I was now.
Absolutely. Did you get any heat from Brother Love, or I guess it was JR who was head of talent relations when he came back, or was it?
Yeah, when I went, as soon as I walked back, you know, behind the curtain, he was right there, fucking red faced, yelling at me. He was like, you know, did you fucking hear me? And I was like, yeah, I heard you. I was told 10 minutes and I took 10. I don't know what to tell you, man. You know, like and like I said, I knew I wasn't losing anything. You know, like they had already shown me that there was no interest in me. I swear to God, I probably had eight different tryouts for them before the Beyond the Mat one, you know, and most of them got cut short, or there was one of the tryouts. I ended up being a match against Kurgan. I was supposed to have a tryout, and I get there, and Cornette was like, "Hey, you know, I know I told you I'd, you know, get you a little tryout in this, you know, but I really need you in this spot right now, and here's what's happening, and blah blah blah, and so it kind of sucked a little bit, but at the same time, I'm really glad that I didn't let my pride stand in the way of me making some money and putting over a guy that is now in lots of movies. Like every time I see him in a movie, I'm like, I fought that guy. He ain't so tough. He didn't kill me, you know. Uh, Same with Nathan Jones. I wrestled Nathan Jones down in Los Angeles, and I see him in a lot of movies. And every time I see him in a movie, that's what I think. I think, man, you didn't beat me, like,
Scary individual.
oh
I,
yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your any XPW stories. The fans are interested in that.
Oh, XPW, man, that was a wild ride, and I'm really glad that they've resurfaced, and they're doing really well. They've got this guy Schlack. Uh, I think he's their champion, and he's fighting a MAGA Butcher, which is, I guess, like Donald Trump Butcher, I guess. I don't know, but this Schlack guy, man, he's got a great look. He's perfect for the company. Just built like he's got muscles coming out of his ears, mohawk, and he's just got this crazy ugly face thing that he does with blood coming down. He's just awesome for that company, and I'm so happy to see that they're doing things again. Um, I loved my time with that company. Unfortunately, the way it all ended kind of sucked. Um, but Rob Black treated me really well. Always paid me what he said he would pay me. I never had a problem in any way with him that way. The problem I ran into was I showed up and he wanted Jake Lawless and I to fake rape a girl in the ring as like an angle. We were gonna like corner her, start ripping her clothes off, and kind of getting on top of her, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And I thought about it, and I thought, this is probably going to get me some heat because they have a porn company, so to them this is nothing. But I'm a wrestler, so to me this is a big thing. And if my grandma was here, I wouldn't want her to watch that. And so I was like, I really don't think I can do that. So I told Rob I couldn't do that, and he wasn't happy with me, and in fact he was pissed. And I'm really glad that I didn't. It ended up being that it's illegal, and the people that were involved in that angle actually got in trouble for it. It is illegal in the state of California to in a public setting reenact a rape. Movies get away with it because it's a closed set. It's not open to the public, but you aren't allowed to do that in California, and it's illegal. And so luckily my morals kind of saved me from getting caught up in all that bullshit. But after that, I pretty much knew that there was nothing for me in XPW. Rob was a very all or nothing kind of guy, and either you give him all of your loyalty or you're not, you're somebody else, And so that was pretty much the end of my career with that company. Um, it was wild though, man. I got to meet a lot of really cool people. I got to work with Chris Candido there as well. Um, Sabu, I met down there. And then, of course, one of my students, Vic Grimes, was a big star down there. And he's, did the big famous fall off the scaffold and almost die. And, he called me from the hospital room after all of that, after he fell off of that scaffold. I was really shocked. He called me from the hospital room and he told me that I was right. He said, Mike, you were right. All the times you told me you were right. Because I always told him to not be doing that shit. Like if that's the only way you can get a crowd to react, is by jumping off of something really high, well, you're not going to make it long in this business because eventually that's going to hurt you. You better know how to, do some actual wrestling and tell a story to get to get a reaction, because that's where the money is. That's where longevity is, you know.
Since you
Yeah.
since you brought that up, a lot of fans, myself included, consider that. I mean, people talk about the Foley bump off the cage. I consider that by far to be the most dangerous bump a
Oh,
wrestler ever taken, that's at least been on TV. Did
yes.
There's a lot of mythology around that. We had Angel Medina on the podcast about a month ago, where he talked about his experiences with New Jack and that particular setup in particular. What did we haven't heard much from Vic's perspective about what happened there and the taser and all that sort of stuff. Did he get into any of those details with you?
Yeah, he didn't get tased. New Jack wasn't trying to kill him. And you can even see on the footage, you know, Vic takes a Beal bump off of the scaffold. You know, he takes his own bump, and Vic's such a big guy that if New Jack wouldn't have been able to pick him up and toss him anywhere if he don't want to go. New Jack could have tased him and kicked him off of the scaffold to where he's trying to hold on and he tumbles off of it, you know, but the way he took that bump, that wasn't, you know, that was just a bump. And it was just people sometimes they don't think about the distance. So Vic tried to bump shallow, but because of the height, even a shallow bump by the time you're at the bottom has turned into a long bump, you know, and that's what ended up being bad. It would have been a lot better if he would have just fallen straight down. That's how you want to go, not off like he did. But yeah, there was no New Jack was definitely crazy. Don't get me wrong, he was a crazy individual, but at the same time, he was still a professional as well. You know.
Well, Michael, I appreciate how generous you've been with your time. I feel we've got a lot left still to discuss into your Mexican career, deep dive into Japan, and the special that people still talk about. But if you have the time in the future, we'd love to have you back. What are you up to lately?
You know, man, lately I'm just concentrating on raising my daughter. Uh, I'm in really good shape, and part of me still wants to wrestle. But wrestling stuff is all on the weekends, and that's when I have my daughter. I have her Friday through Sunday, every Friday through Sunday, and she's 5 years old, and I just can't take away any time, you know, from that. It's what I love doing. And I'm also doing some acting. I've done some commercials. I recently did 2 spots for Solano County Behavioral Health. And people can catch me on Netflix on the show 13 Reasons Why, season 2, episodes 11 and 12, which it's a great show. If you haven't watched it, it's a fantastic show. If you were a fan of Beverly Hills 90210 back in the day, you will love 13 Reasons Why. But be prepared. It's very dark at times, and it's very heavy subject matter. So, a little warning for people there. It does deal with teen suicide and a lot of topics and subjects that teens face nowadays. It delves into, but yeah, I got to play a cop on that. So doing a lot more acting, and wrestling wise, man, I don't know. I pretty much think I'm done, but I'm not one of those people that will retire and then get back into it. So I haven't officially retired. I still do some seminars occasionally, some training seminars, and so I still have my boots. I'm not getting rid of them just yet.
Right on. Where can folks find you on social media if they want to get a hold of you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram. I think it's Michael Modest 3. Facebook, Michael Modest, and um, what's the other one? Oh, Twitter. I'm on Twitter as well, Michael Modest as well. Um, And that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for this interview. It's been fascinating, and again, we'd love to have you back if you ever have the time. It's been quite illuminating on a number of topics. So thank you again.
Right on, man. Thank you so much, Jack. You have a great evening.
You too, sir.
All right,
Fans,
take care.
we'll catch you on Sunday for another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.